everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing well today. I'm Marian, and today I thought we'd take a break from the Bronte sisters and a bit of a break from the in-depth analysis and just talk about summer reading and kind of what's new and what's new with you as well, if you'd like to share. I've got some books here, some old, some new, some currently reading, some upcoming, so just wanted to share that. I've also got the world's tiniest Dr. Pepper here. Not the most aesthetically pleasing, but kind of cute, and I'll be enjoying that on the side as I go through some books that are mostly classics, but some other things as well. So let's jump right into it. So, what have I been reading lately in general? Quite a few things, actually. So, obviously, Villette and Wuthering Heights, but also picked up An Artist of the Floating World by Kazuo Ishiguro. Now, I've read this before, years ago, but some friends on an online book club I'm part of decided to read this. Well, we decided to get together a buddy group and read it. And I find myself having forgotten quite a lot of it. It is about this elderly Japanese man. This is in the post-World War II era, so the first section starts in 1948. And he's kind of looking back over his life as a propaganda artist for Imperial Japan. And as you might imagine, his status in society has changed quite a bit since the war. But what I liked about this novel is how it's so subtle. It just unwraps in layers and layers like an onion, and it's not very dramatic. It's very understated, classic Ishiguro. It's just so subtle. And in fact, the way the book starts is he's just talking about a house he bought and how the sale of the house went. And then he starts talking about other mundane things, such as his daughter's wedding preparations, or rather her marriage preparations, because there's this lengthy application process and investigation they have to do in those days for people to get married to each other. So really interesting cultural things, but also just this, he's not even really aware that he's going over his life. That's just how subtle it is. And he doesn't really have a full grasp on his memories. We find out that he remembers certain things and he remembers people saying certain things, but sometimes he doesn't know who said it exactly. And his mind tries to fill in the gaps a bit. And there's parts of the book where I'm not really sure if he's misremembering, filling in the gaps, or trying to paint a different picture of his past because of his change in circumstances and status. So much subtlety, beautifully, beautifully written. This is definitely a slower read, but perfect for summer. Wonderful to reread it with other people reading it for the first time. I do think this is one of Ishiguro's best books and kind of overlooked because it came out in the 80s along with The Remains of the Day and A Pale View of Hills. Both of those novels have now gotten their own film adaptations. I don't think this one has one, but I think it's really a strong work on its own. And yeah, just a joy to reread, honestly. And kind of an interesting case study, if you will, in writing first-person narrators. And I started thinking a lot about unreliable narrators because I talked about that in Villette recently. And this guy is, I don't know if it's so much being unreliable, but he's just human, he just remembers things differently. And I think you can see that direct inspiration from Villette. Ishiguro has stated publicly Villette's been a big influence for him. So you can see that direct connection with Villette. You can also kind of start to pick apart the question of, is there such a thing as an unreliable narrator, or are they just people? Do people aren't, we're not machines, we're not, binary zeros and ones, true, false. Our memories and our experiences can be kind of fluid and they change. It's one of the reasons I love to journal, is you go back and you realize, wow, I kind of felt differently about something than I remember feeling it about And then there's, of course, events that you forget altogether. So, yeah, great book for summer. Highly recommend if you're looking for something with, that real thoughtfulness of writing and prose that's not just beautiful, but is very well crafted and has like a real purpose behind the way it's crafted. So, yeah, definitely recommend this one. Oops. My monitor's over here off camera, and I think I just bumped it. Okay, so I want to talk a little more about, mundane things for a minute, because I'm also reading some poems by Seamus Heaney. I think I said that right. This is his collection of poems from his latter part of his career, because he started in the 60s with Death of a Naturalist and so wrote for many, many decades. And honestly, I am not that familiar with him. I've only read his Beowulf poem, a translation, I should say, many years ago. And I'm not the biggest fan of Beowulf, if I'm being completely honest. So this book's been really interesting getting into his original work. Lots of nostalgia, lots of childhood. His use of rhyme and structure is pretty fluid as well, and I like how he uses both interchangeably without limiting himself to one or the other. I don't feel like many of the poems have really resonated with me yet, but I did really like this poem. It's called The Skylight, and I don't know if I'm really allowed to read it on camera necessarily. There's all kinds of rules about that. When you get out of public domain works. So look up The Skylight, Seamus Heaney, or if you can find this from your library as I did, check it out. It's a beautiful, beautiful poem about change and about people helping you live life a little bit differently sometimes and showing you a new perspective. So poetry has been part of my daily reading. I've also been working through Rilke. I've shown this book before, but as you can see, it's pretty well tabbed at this point, and I'm getting close to the end. I'm in the Sonnets to Orpheus, which is one of his other major works. Previously, I reviewed the Duino Elegies. But the Sonnets to Orpheus are, as you might imagine, about the mythological being Orpheus, and who was renowned for being a musician, a harpist, and songwriter, I believe. So this is a book to really be savored very slowly. I've mentioned before how much of a symbolic writer Rilke is. So the way he uses language is not intended to be interpreted completely, as is. You definitely have to make use of the notes section. I have a permanent bookmark for the notes, but there's some really beautiful stuff in here. Lots of really spiritual writing, I would say. And I don't really use that word lightly. I don't think I've really encountered this before in a non-Christian book, myself as a Christian, finding a book that is spiritual and kind of speaks to me and I can understand it in my own religious context has been really powerful. And I did a whole video on that with the Duino Elegies, so if you're interested, you can check that out. But yeah, the other thing I've really loved about this book is having the German. And I don't read German, I don't know German. But one of the things that's so valuable about this is I can see where he is rhyming. Like, I know enough about German pronunciation. I can tell that most of these are rhyming poems, but the translation has had to be rendered to free verse to kind of convey his full meaning. And I guess I have really mixed feelings about that. It really makes me feel like I'm losing something, and yet because his meaning is so esoteric at times, I can't really imagine trying to render it in poetry, in a rhyme, I should say. So completely understand why the translators went this direction, and it just makes me appreciate so much more, well, the fact that we have translations, but also how much is missed. And, maybe someday I will learn to read German. I'd love to read Kafka in the original. Anyways, this has been a really great reading experience. Really great slow reading for the year, really. I've had that book since last August, so almost a full year. But enjoying it very, very slowly. So let's see, I've teased this one. It's shown on screen a few times now. We have essays by George Orwell. This is something I'd been meaning to pick up for a while. And I've read one of his essays, Shooting an Elephant in University. But there's other interesting essays in here about, for example, other authors. Now, one reason I picked this up is I opened the book and it's like shooting an elephant. I'm like, where's the introduction? Where's the table of contents? Well, this seems to be a misprint because we have all of that information in the back of the book. After the explanatory notes, we have the stuff that was supposed to come at the beginning, and I have other Oxford World Classics, so I know this is not normal. And I thought maybe they were trying to be like, I don't know, Orwellian or something by putting it in the back. Don't ask me how that would be Orwellian, but I thought they were trying to be, clever or something, but I'm pretty sure it's just a misprint. I mean, that's not normal. So I was really tickled to get this unique printing of these essays. And so what really excites me is there's essays on Dickens. There's one on Wodehouse. For those of you Wodehouse fans, he came under a lot of fire during World War II and was suspected of being a Nazi sympathizer or something. And I think as far as I know, it's unfounded, but I will be really curious to read that essay and see what Orwell had to say about it. There's some other things here that look really intriguing, such as Wells' Hitler and the World State. Notes on nationalism could be very, very relevant. Why I Write sounds really interesting. Something about Tolstoy and King Lear, maybe. So, yeah, I'm very excited to read this. The only reason I haven't picked it up yet is I just have too many other things going right now, but this will be another slow read for sure, and look forward to discussing some of those on the channel. So, what else have we got here? Actually, I want to turn to this book for a minute. This has been another daily read for me, almost daily. It's called Modeling Early Christianity, Social Scientific Studies of the New Testament in Its Context, edited by Philip F. Esler. The friend that I'm doing Reading the World with picked this up, and I was looking into it and thought, yeah, that sounds really interesting. This book, quote, explores the intriguing and foreign social context of first century Palestine and the Greco-Roman East, in which the Christian faith was first proclaimed and the New Testament documents were written. It demonstrates that a sophisticated analysis of the context is essential in order to understand the original meaning of the text. So, I've long been aware that having a good historical understanding can help with reading the Bible. But I think something that I didn't really think about was the social sciences part of it, which is related to the history, but it kind of goes into anthropology and, documenting and exploring how people, lived, for lack of a better word. So not just historical events necessarily, but also cultural practices, attitudes, and that's just not a way I've ever really read the Bible, I guess. I've gotten bits and pieces of it over the years, but not systematically. I haven't gone through anything like this before. And this is an academic book, so it's a bit of a challenge for me, but I'm finding it pretty readable. And so far, we've read the first 3 essays. So Herodian Economics in Galilee, The Transfiguration of Jesus, The Evil Eye in the New Testament. So 3 very, very different topics. And I have learned something from pretty much all 3 of these essays. I think the first 2 especially were really interesting. And I think one thing that makes this really important is, if you just jump into the Bible, right, like you might not really get a sense of how people would have received, for example, Jesus's teaching at the time and some of the cultural context that they themselves would be hearing the messages in. So this book, what it does is it tries to use models. And by models, they're talking about like, well, just like a model today, right? Like you've got, actually, there's pictures of some of the models that might explain it better than I can. But for example, in the Transfiguration of Jesus, they're using a particular model to analyze the experience that Jesus and the disciples had when Jesus goes up to the mountain and they see a vision of Moses and Elijah talking to him, and Peter offers to build them tents. A pretty familiar story for Christians. But this model, has like these different factors, and then it takes the story and tries to analyze it through each of these factors. So awareness of environment of each of the subjects, ability to communicate, whether, where were people's attention concentrated, were the people calm when this happened, like self-awareness. So there's these different factors, and it's just a framework, right? And I think that's one of the things I appreciated about this author editor, he wrote one of the essays. I appreciated how, going back to this idea that, history is really much influenced by the historian. Nonetheless, you can definitely come up with a framework, a model, if you will, for understanding the past based on evidence. So that would be historical writings. He references Josephus a lot, or one of the authors does. Several of them do, I think. And other contemporary to Jesus, historians and record keepers. Also, archaeological evidence comes into this as well. One caveat with this book is I believe it's from the 90s, so some of the research may be a little bit outdated, but nonetheless, for someone completely new to the topic, it's been a great read and very, very informative. And with the Transfiguration story in particular, I didn't realize that what they're calling altered state consciousness, or trances, that kind of thing. It's just something that's been very prevalent in cultures throughout history. And, it's not as if what you see in the New Testament is necessarily, to Christians, obviously it's different because it is divine and it's originating from the only divinity in the world. But the experience can also be found in other cultures. Now, how you interpret them and like what are the origins of those experiences, obviously subject to debate and gonna depend on your own viewpoints. But nonetheless, I think it puts it into a nice context, because it doesn't seem so strange if you compare it to other cultures and what their institutions would have considered to be expected experiences. Even the Romans had their own occult practices, and they talk about that in some detail as well. So really interesting stuff. Really, really cool way of getting some more information and taking that back to New Testament reading and getting more out of it, really. Okay. So these are a couple of new books I've gotten. This is Nostromo by Joseph Conrad. This will be another reread. I had a copy of this, but I ended up getting rid of it when I moved. So I've now gotten this newer Penguin edition, which will be really nice, I think. Much more, the font size, I think, is much more friendlier than the other version I had. So I'll be rereading that in November and probably December as well, because it's a bit of a doorstopper. And then this book, which has been at the bottom of the stack in this video, because it's just, you just can't, you can't see it and not think about it, right? So what this is I saw this in a bookstore, and it's about cannibalism, a history of cannibalism, and particularly through the lens of legal cases. So one of the stories I have read is The Wreck of the Whale Ship Essex by Owen Chase. Read that so many years ago. and it's one of the inspirations for the novel Moby Dick. And Owen Chase, I mean, this isn't really a spoiler because this is what he's famous for, but him and some of his crew members ended up committing cannibalism to survive after a whale in a freak accident attacked their ship and it all went down. Really interesting story. There's lots of books and movies about it now, but his original account I think I would particularly recommend, and I don't know if this book goes into that particular story, but I think it's one of those things that I think is just curious. And I don't know, when it comes to history, nothing's really off limits to me. I think it's just kind of interesting to learn about different things and think about them from different angles. So, yeah. My husband gifted me this book recently because he also thought it looked kind of interesting. And yeah, it's just one of those really niche things that, only a very nerdy people will probably want to get into. But yeah, that's one of my latest books I've received. What else? I think that's about it, honestly, for this video. It probably went on a bit longer than I meant to. And yeah, I guess one thing that has happened recently in terms of life updates is I've been in the UK for over a year now. Recently hit that milestone, and things are going well. If you'd love to hear more about it, I can do a video on that or a blog post or something. So let me know if you're interested in it. But yeah, lots of changes, but good changes. I've been feeling really happy here and excited to explore more of the UK, more of its literary and historical sites and things, just because things are calming down a bit more in life and starting to get into more of a routine. So yeah, thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.